With that, I would like to open our first dialogue, so the North American dialogue. Let me invite our moderator, Sinead O'Sullivan, economist at Harvard Business School, but also a very engaged member of our advisory council, together with our speakers. So I would invite Jamie Morin, Vice President of Defense Strategic Space at the Aerospace Corporation, and Jean-Claude Piedboeuf, Senior Vice President of Space Programs at the Canadian Space Agency. We were also supposed to have Gregory Mann, NASA Europe representative, but of course, the government shutdown has precluded his participation with us today, which may be per se a very important message that he leaves with us. I leave the floor immediately to Sinead, please.
Thank you. I'm setting an alarm because I don't trust that we have an Italian to time keep for us. So we should hear that go off. And when the alarm goes off, we can take a few questions. My lack of filter means this is going to be very good or very dangerous that we're talking about the scandal in North America at the minute. Quickly, before I introduce our fantastic panelists, I want to figure out where the room is in terms of what's going on in the US. So let's think about NASA. I don't know if you've heard, NASA may become the Department of Transportation, and we may be getting rid of, or they may be getting rid of NASA entirely. Hands up if you think this time next year there will be a NASA. Okay, less optimistic on this side. Okay, that's, a few half hands. Interesting, okay. Let's get to the crux of our discussion. And I'm going to introduce our panelists. So we have, with very long titles, Jean-Claude Piedboeuf, Senior Vice President of Space Missions at the Canadian Space Agency, including, your bio, by the way, has every job title that is available at an organization, including Vice President Corporate Strategy and Innovation and Chief Financial Officer. And Jamie Morin, Executive Director of the Aerospace Corporation Center for Space Policy and Strategy, and former US Air Force Chief Financial Officer. Very exciting. When we get into the space accounting, we know who to go to. Okay, so let's begin with big picture. This kind of shifting geometry of power itself starting in the US and unraveling in the rest of the world. In a multipolar space order, how do the US, Canada, and Europe define one another, and where is the real leverage now? And Jean-Claude, I'd like to start with you, the really hard question. I'm sorry in advance. In Europe, we clearly think of ourselves as a space power. We've written this so often around this room that we're hoping you leave thinking the same thing. But is this how North Americans think of Europe? And, from your perspective, and from the institutional perspective, is Europe seen as a partner, a junior ally, or, dare I say, competitor?
Hi, and thanks for the invitation, and thanks for inviting Canada. So from a Canadian perspective, we have been working in space for a long time, early 1960, and we work initially with NASA, but soon after, we started to work with Europe. So for Canada, Europe is certainly seen as a major partner of what we are doing in space, and Europe has the capacity of doing, it's a competition, but it's a healthy competition between Europe, Canada, and the rest of the world, but it's really partnering to do space activities.
Yeah, in a truly multipolar world, with the US, China, Europe, India, each of them playing strong roles, where does Europe's real leverage lie? So is it in these kind of industrial scale type programs that we see in North America, norm setting and diplomacy, science? I'd like to get both of your perspectives on that. What can we actually do?
On my perspective, it's again, we have a long-standing relationship with Europe, and in terms of the way Europe is working, and we saw it this morning with the speech from the DG and other intervention. Europe and ESA are trained to work in collaboration. By default, European Union is a collaboration, ESA is a collaboration. So in that sense, it's stronger. And so for Canada to be working with Europe, and we are a cooperating member since 1979 with the European Space Agency, so it's a very long-standing relationship. And so we want to continue to do this work. And we still work with NASA, so it's not exclusive, but it's really the resilience and adding partner, it's always a good thing.
Jamie, I'm curious to get your thoughts on this one.
Well, so first, grüß Gott and to Ludwig, vielen Dank für die Einladung. It is wonderful to be with ESPI and to see the scale of the group that's gathered here together. I think that speaks to the rejuvenation of European space and thinking at the policy level. This is something to be proud of. To get to your fundamental question, Sinead, I think we need to start with something even bigger, which is, what does it mean to lead? And, you know, there are some people whose vision of leadership is like a race and leadership is coming in first. And there are others who measure success in leadership by the team you bring together. A colleague of mine at Aerospace, and I should note, Aerospace works extremely closely with the US government, but I'm not speaking on behalf of the US government, of course. A colleague of mine really pushed us to think in terms of the concept of the bicycle peloton. In a peloton, when you have a group of riders working together as a team, they can move faster because they can overcome air resistance better together. But a peloton only works well if even the weakest rider in the group can generally keep up with the strong. And so I think we're in a moment right now where some of the investment disparities that Joseph identified earlier today can be addressed. Mm-hmm. We can come through this moment with a more capable peloton that can accomplish great things at a global level together. So the geopolitical challenge of the moment, driven by the further invasion in Ukraine, driven by the populist swing globally, that can be a rejuvenator to have us be stronger when we come through this moment to a period of greater collaboration and sustained activity. The things that we're trying to accomplish here are at a scale that is beyond a single nation's solution.
Oh, I want to push back on that a little bit. Because right now, I mean, and we have talked in the industry about this for years, and this is the kind of, the raison d'etre of collaboration and the European model. Sorry, I've gone off script now. But we've always talked about how we need collaboration because the ideal outcome is just bigger than any one nation. But we now live in an era of I hesitate to use the word governance, where we just add zeros onto the ends of numbers. Like if we think about the space industry as one of the largest kind of capital uses of government programs, well, now we have AI and chips. And we have a president in the United States who says, oh, we're going to make a number, 100 trillion, 200 trillion. So we used to, at ESPI, it's funny, we used to talk about millions and hundreds of millions. Then one day I said, we should talk about billions. I mean, Trump is now bringing us into the world of trillions. So does the model for collaborative investment in the industry still stand when private companies are putting trillions of dollars into something, which is more than a single or multiple governments can? I don't know.
Yeah, I will push back there a bit on the premise, because while private investment is enormously important today in the space sector, it is often in pursuit of government revenue.
Yes.
Almost all of the companies in the US space sector and almost all the companies in the European space sector, and I think essentially all the companies in the Chinese space sector, are positioning to be recipients of government funding for the services or products they're building. So it remains a symbiotic relationship, and yes, the amount of capital that individual entrepreneurs have been able to raise and put into some of the proliferated low Earth orbit communications constellations is significant. But the relationship between government and the space sector is going to remain highly symbiotic.
Okay.
And the goals to which that investment is put are going to be profoundly shaped by the politics of the individual countries. So there are still policy choices there.
Okay, I'm glad we have someone fluent in balance sheets to bring us down to earth again. Jean-Claude, I have a question for you. Now, Canada sits kind of uniquely between the mayhem of the United States and maybe a growing chaoticness of Europe. Is there a growing pressure to diversify partnerships from NASA and the US into other regions? And what does this have, if any, implication on kind of secondary or tertiary space economies like South Korea or Australia? Do we care about them?
Yeah, we care. On the Canadian front, our Prime Minister announced very early in his mandate that he wants to diversify Canadian economy, and his first visit was in Europe, and so it was clear from the political level there is an interest in diversifying economy. It's not to say that we are not going to work with US, we is still our main economic partner, but diversification is providing resilience, and that's what we need. So there is a very strong interest. There was some agreement signed at the European level, so we are working at the ESA level, but there is work with the European Commission. Recently, I think 2-3 years ago, Canada joined Horizon Europe, so there is already this work together, which is within ESA, but also we are working like security arrangement with the European Commission, so it's really a larger spectrum of activity that Canada is looking. So partnering with Europe, and it's adding resilience. And I have to say, we work with ESA on different fronts. We are a cooperating member, and so our industry, European industry and Canadian industry are working well together. We are also a partner of ESA on Earth observation, on exploration, and so this is really this different aspect that we also share data from space on between Radarsat constellation and Copernicus. We are backup of each other.
Yeah, and it's lovely to hear that, because I was thinking about when we were listening about the African Space Agency, and it's actually really lovely to talk about, I guess, collaboration as a competitive advantage in a world where, while certain leadership is stepping back. And I want to go back to this idea of leadership, you know, and the kind of increasingly fragmented role that the US is playing in space governance. And think about what happens when one of these more traditional anchors starts to drift, and, you know, US leadership in space governance has become more distributed, is the polite word I'm going to use. Jamie, the US historically has been the anchor of global space cooperation, but that anchor is loosening, partly by design, partly through other ways and means. So Greg Mann was supposed to be here with us today. He is the European representative for NASA. He is not here. We did joke about putting a cardboard cutout of him. He is not here because the government is shut down and furloughed. I mean, this is a very kind of physical, visual, I guess, understanding of the role that NASA is playing in global space relationships. They're quite literally not on the stage anymore. How do you interpret the shift? Is it a sign of decline? Or, you know, kind of redistribution of responsibility? What is your take?
So I'll start with the fundamental.
That's a big question, sorry.
Yet another softball. Thank you, Sinead. I'll start with the fundamentals, which is obviously it is not a good thing for U.S. leadership or the U.S. economy or progress on global issues when the U.S. government is shut down. That's unhelpful, and hopefully we can get all of the stakeholders together and get to agreements that allow us to get that reopened. I am a poor cardboard cut out for NASA, but I will try to be the best I can here. I think one of the underappreciated pieces of collaboration in space is that the deep technical choices that we make as we set out on our individual programs really define what we can do down the road. Most things we try to accomplish in space, despite all of the efforts people are talking about to make programs move faster, are sustained human endeavor, right? They're decade-long efforts, in some cases longer. We make a whole bunch of technical choices as we proceed through those program timelines, and those will determine whether they're open or closed in nature. Many people in this room, I'm sure, experienced the Galileo GPS dialogues of 25 years ago. We've ended up in a world where your phone can move fairly smoothly between those systems and use them to complement one another. That was not a guarantee, right? That was a product of negotiations and choices along the way. So in a moment like today, even while there's positioning going on and there's governance breakdowns in some areas, at the technical level, we can still make choices that will let us accelerate later. Or we can choose otherwise and put up stronger walls that will make it harder to accelerate later. So I think you can tell where my view is on that.
Thank you. Jean-Claude, I'd love to hear similarly, the Canadian perspective, and in particular thinking about, they kind of that, what is it they say, whatever doesn't kill you makes you stronger. As we see this, that the US has pulled back from anchoring the global space economy, is this a good opportunity for us to become collectively, without the US, to become stronger and to step into roles that we may not have imagined for ourselves before? Or is it just going to kill us?
A crisis is always an opportunity, but I think and there was Galileo was mentioned, so there is already some resilience built in the system. We can think of Galileo, Copernicus, and communication. So this has been distributed through a lot of discussion, but it's important to be, and it was mentioned, to be a good partner. You need to have autonomy, you need to have resilience, you need to have capacity. So this is, I think it's important if we want to be a partner from a Canadian perspective, if you want to be a partner with NASA, with Europe. The good example is the Canadarm2, which was built for the space station, and it was essential to build the space station. Without this Canadarm2, the space station could not have been built. So it was a sign of a deep trust in what Canada could do. And so this is an example on exploration, and we have been working on our own constellation of radar satellites, C-band SAR, where we provide the data for the world also. So so basically in EO, Earth observation, satellite communication, there is already good resilience and autonomy in different partners and some joint activity. Where I will say NASA is certainly leading is the human exploration. They are setting the tone on the western side at least, and this is important. Exploration is a lot about interoperability. You need to bring a lot of partners, and we need a good governance to do that. We need to, Europe is building different parts, Canada is doing something, Japan is doing something, and NASA is also doing the work. But having a strong governance and make sure that we can interoperate the system is key. So on human exploration, NASA leadership is still key.
Yeah, and I want to move to, well, let me look at we have a very quick minute left before we take any questions. We cannot talk about this without talking about industry and commercial ecosystems, of course. This is where we're probably seeing these kind of alliances being tested the most, right? Probably because of well, Elon Musk, who's at the middle of this, is really pressure testing a lot of the, I guess, relationships between different geographies and then the private and the public sector. So as governments and companies race to build constellations today and to secure their own supply chains, not only in space, but across the board, are we seeing this as a kind of healthy collaboration across the Atlantic? Or is this the first sign of kind of strategic decoupling? Maybe thinking about, SpaceX and Starlink and Iris Squared. What does this mean? Is this a good or a bad thing for the industry? And I'd like to get both of your perspectives on that.
Yeah, so I would start with, first, it's terrific if nations around the world make decisions to increase their investment in the space sector. My view is the returns on investment destinations from investment in space are higher than in many other sectors that they might look at. They're not the only areas we should be investing, but they're certainly important. I do think governments have to be fairly cold-minded and critical in looking at exactly where to invest. And so some parts of the space industry are commoditizing. They're becoming broadly available from commercially oriented providers, not necessarily perfect providers, but broadly available from commercially oriented providers. And so it may make sense in certain cases to say, while I may need some level of core strategic autonomy and a fallback option in the case that those providers are unavailable, for the bulk of my activity, I will assume they will be available, and I won't spend a lot of time trying to build a fully globally competitive alternative in that area, because there are other priority investments where such players are not available. That may be an outcome that we see in a lot of nations. Europe is at a scale where if they put their mind to it, they could develop players in launch, in low Earth orbit, comm. Is there enough resources to do both at a scale to be actually globally competitive? I think that's an open question and a strategic decision that the European institutions and the individual nation states are going to have to work through.
Yeah, I think that the key word there is trade-offs, right? I mean, Canada, are we going to have a Canadian Starlink anytime soon?
There is one being built by Telesat with the support of the government. It's not totally similar to Starlink, but it's a LEO constellation to provide enterprise services. And so, and the point, and it was mentioned in this morning also, it's the who is controlling a system. So if a government is depending on a communication, on Earth observation, you need to know that it could access the data or the services when you want it. And so there is a balance. And telecommunication in Canada has been done by Telesat. Telesat was initially a government enterprise. Now it's fully private. But the government is using that. But we have the confidence that Telesat will provide the service when the government needs it. And so this is key. And I think for any country, any region, you need to be able to say, when I need something, I can access something. So this is why there was always this debate between sovereign system and buying the service from anywhere in the world.
I guess on that point, for that to enable and exist, you need, I guess, fair laws and some level of normalcy within a system, which may be a system that we're moving away from. We have, I think, a couple of minutes for one. All right, the Italians on my case. We can have one or two questions if there are any. Make them like really, really, really controversial. The questions I wasn't allowed to ask. I think we have one hand at the back here. Yeah, could we? Yeah, super, thank you. And then we have a question over there.
If you look back in history, building bridges has always been supported or founded on collaborating in not only science, but collaborating in trade, in innovations and technology. If you look at countries that could build bridges very quickly in the space sector, and then also make Europe a space power in partnership with these other countries. How could we initiate more government-related or government-supported programs in exchanging innovation, in, for instance, also mutually planning and implementing between bilateral or be it multilateral programs to bring not only science but also industries, especially SMEs, together. For instance, years ago, we had between Germany and Canada, we had this program on jointly using spaceborne radar data. Admittedly, it didn't come much out of it because it was understaffed, it was underfunded, and it was too short. But can we improve this? Can we staff government agencies to really manage that, to implement, plan, and manage it? And can we support our industries to work together across continents under these programs to then join competences, come in with different expertise, and then make real fast progress?
Okay. If you thought my questions were hard, feel free to fix the space industry.
I can start because this is really close to what we want to achieve. And one of the good reasons why Canada is a cooperating member of ESA is because it's bringing Canadian industry with the European industry. And so we have been developing so many partnerships. This was and is growing both Canadian space sector and European space sector. So this is a way, so ESA has been very efficient in making this matching with all the process they put in place. So this is very important. I will say on the exploration side, we have been working with NASA and also ESA and JAXA. At the end, at the core of that, it's also our industry that are working together because they need to, even if the program are paid by the government and are managed by the government, it's at the end, it's the industry that need to talk together to make sure that everything is working together, even if the end infrastructure will be managed by the government.
Thank you. Thank you for that great question. We had one hand up over here. Can we somehow get this over there? Or you can shout really loud. Thank you.
Thank you. Talking about controversial, our relationship with China has been coined by strong suspicions, strong, let's say, racist ideas even, sometimes supremacist views, or just rivalry. However, currently our relationship with the US is also marred by the unpredictability of the United States as a strategic partner. The, let's say, self-destructive nature of the US in itself is a time to maybe move away from our focus on the US as a strategic partner and move more towards a country that is looking actively towards win-win cooperation, such as China, that is trying to approach us, or has tried to approach us for many years for increased collaboration, but was always met with suspicion and exclusion from our projects, not only in space, but also in fusion and so on. Thank you.
Oh my God, I'm glad that's the last question. Jamie, yeah, I'm going to hand this one over to you.
So there's no question that China, as was presented earlier this morning, is a rising space player at significant scale. The level of investment they're making is very real. The developments that we expect to see in their fielding of proliferated low Earth orbit communications and Earth observation constellations over the next just 2 to 3 years are, I think, going to be pretty astounding for people that aren't watching this sector closely. What this gets to is the problems that we are facing in the space sector now are global problems. The crowding of the domain is real, as we heard from our colleague from the African Space Council. it's going to raise the barriers to everyone acting in the domain. And if we do not have solutions to cooperating in a crowded commons, we are going to have losses. We are going to have failures to manage traffic in a sustainable way. So these are very real issues, and a rule of never speaking is not going to be helpful. However, there are real geopolitical challenges in close cooperation with China, and there are real risks that have to be assessed there. Theft of intellectual property is a real thing. It is not just a slur. It is real, and there's strong evidence of it. So we have to figure out how to collaborate. We have to figure out how to do so in a way that doesn't undermine fundamental national and regional interests. There's not an easy solution here, but again, space is inherently global, and we can't treat it as if it's not.
I love how diplomatic you two are. That's amazing. I want to thank both Jamie, the Aerospace Corporation, and Jean-Claude from the Canadian Space Agency. We are so lucky to have had such extraordinary experience to discuss something as tricky, unfortunately without our NASA representative, as the North American global relations. Thank you very much. And yeah, give our panelists a round of applause, please.